A sixth offensive lineman enters the transfer portal for South Carolina. Is it time to panic at all? 12 players in the portal, six from the offensive line alone. Or is it once again a situation where the worst unit on the team is only going to get better with addition by subtraction? Locked on Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I am your host, Chris Marler, the host of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network, the number one podcast network, sports podcast network in America. And we have you to thank for that. I appreciate it. We got a good show for you today. We have a new ad read to get back to, which I'm pretty pumped about. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Rugiet. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Got a good show for you today. It's a mixed bag of things to talk about on here. As a sixth offensive lineman enters the transfer portal, and I hate to be this sunshine pumping homer, but I'm kind of going to do it anyway. And that is kind of taking the stance of, is it just addition by subtraction? Like at this point, is it addition by subtraction? I've done something that I haven't done in a while on here, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I've done it today. And that is prepare for my job to talk to you about the actual numbers of things. I'm not going to look up anything on PFF. I probably still will. But also, I remember last year, one of the numbers you guys have heard me talk about ad nauseum coming out of the portal was, hey, you lost from guard to guard, center guard, 93.5% of your total snaps. Now, six offensive linemen leaving feels like a pretty big indicator of change, for one, intent to change. And what it also says to me is, if you're Shane Beamer, and you think about the lengths that Shane Beamer has gone this season in trying to retain talent, trying to retain the core part of this team and say, hey, I really want the best part of this team and the guys I've recruited, tried to develop, the guys I've brought in here, I want them here with me as we take the next step as a program and get this thing back on the right track. I don't think this is we had to pay a bunch of money for Sellers, Harbor, and Dylan Stewart, and now we can't afford to get offensive linemen. I don't think that's the case at all. I honestly, if I'm being completely transparent, I think that's more of an indicator of, hey, we're going to keep spending. We're going to keep spending because this is a make or break year. And I think that when you talk about the allocation of funds in college football, it's a fascinating thing to talk about nowadays because it's so important just as much as recruiting. But I look at the people you have lost. I look at the people you have lost in the portal, and I try to look at this from a logical standpoint. And here, I tell you what, we're 3 minutes and 21 seconds in. Where I should have started was the name of the player that entered the portal, Rodney Newsom Jr., a guy that you brought in from this past season from the portal, started at center a couple of games. I think he made 3 total starts on the season. But it's a guy that came in and wasn't exactly what you were hoping for, if we're being honest. Like he wasn't, he didn't continue to play. He made a decent amount of starts, and he had a decent amount of snaps that he was on the field for. But when you look in the grand scheme of things and how much he was on the field, it wasn't anything crazy. He was on the field for 223 snaps, played 9 games, and he was your center. I mean, he was a liability. Let's just call it what it is. He was 48.7%, or 48.7 was his rating from what do you call it? From South Carolina or from PFF from this past season. He was a 46.8 in run blocking, 54.2 in pass blocking. You look at the starters on this team from this year and who played for you. Casey Henry, obviously in very limited action. He was the main guy. Nolan Hay also did pretty well, especially when it comes to pass blocking. Kind of surprised there. But you look at who else was on the field for a significant amount of snaps. Shed Surratt, 72.6 was his pass blocking grade. Tree, even though he's gone too, 69.4. Nick Sharp, 67.7. Those last 2 guys are both in the portal. But I just keep coming down and keep coming down until I finally get to this name. And that's where you end up finding guys like Trayvon Ball, guys like Nick Sharp, and then guys, um, excuse me, like Rodney Newsom as well, who was ranked 29th on the entire team for pass blocking. Run blocking, like I said, was even worse. This is supposed to be a guy that was an instant impact. He was 45th on the team in pass blocking. 46.8 was his grade there. Now you can dive into PFF and say it matters, doesn't matter. I don't really care. I think we would all agree he was not going to be the center next year. That's great. Go find some place to play. I say this all the time. You want what's best for these players. You don't want to burn bridges, talk trash to these guys while they're on their way out. I mean, like, it's frustrating that you've lost 6 guys at one position. But at the same time, you had a guy that came in 2020 at Memphis, played there till 2022, went to junior college in 2022, then went to Western Kentucky 2024. And if I'm just being honest, like I said, this is a guy that you expected to at least be. I know these words came out of my mouth at some point during the offseason. It's at least a grown-ass man playing a game of football between what used to be 18 to 22-year-olds. Now it's 18 to 25-year-olds. But that's a grown-ass man. And for you to still not be developed to go compete at this level, and let's also be clear, to not be able to carve out a place for yourself on the worst offensive line in the conference, the writing's kind of on the wall, and you got to go. And that's fine. Go. I hope he has success wherever he goes next. And I look at this offensive line, like the 6 guys entering the portal. I wish Casey Henry was back. I wish Tree would have stayed, to be honest. I think he could develop into a really good player. I don't think that was ever on the table, though. But I also think about this. If you're Shane Beamer and you are in win now mode, if you are in we have to build right now mode, and we have to go get the pieces that can help us win right now, I don't think Rodney Newsom was a piece that was going to help you win right away, right? I mean, it doesn't. I hate to be that guy, but I don't think he was a piece that's like make or break for how good you're going to be. Now, I'm very intrigued to see what this offensive line will look like under a new coach at that position. I admittedly, the further we get away from the hire, the more I feel like I was very harsh and unfairly harsh to him when the hire was first made. Maybe not because he's a bad coach, maybe because I'm a little bit jaded and dealing with South Carolina PTSD from the offensive line from the past 3 years, but also because the other 2 hires were so great. I think the Newsom situation is also, it makes a really good illustration of what is actually happening at South Carolina right now. And what's actually happening at South Carolina right now is a lot of good. Like it's a lot of good. You are cutting away bad fat from the team, and you are putting on lean muscle in terms of players and coaches that you're keeping. And like every single time they have made a move, we talk about Lucas Sterling, the greatest law firm name in the history of college football, going to LSU. That's really the only big dagger that you've faced this year, right? Like that's really the only big one that was like, that sucks. I hate that. And then you go replace him with one of the best like up and coming coaches at that position in the country. Like I think Beamer has continued to show that it's not just, hey, we're going to make the right moves, because we've seen this before, and you've heard me incorrectly say from last year, and I still going to beat myself up over it, right? And it's probably going to cause me to have some sort of like, I don't know, are they that good of hires? Because I'm so frustrated with what happened last year. Now, I say all that to say, every time it seems like there's a player or coach that leaves, there ends up being an even better news story or story of retention that speaks way more volumes about where this program is more importantly, and also where it's going, but is the most important part of that. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Matthew Fuller, the running back for South Carolina, he announced he's coming back. I think that's a really, really quiet, good get to keep it home. And then also Torrian Gray and retaining him from Virginia Tech. We kind of dive into that a little bit and just not to paint the picture that everything's fine, because you don't want to have double-digit losses to the portal, even though it seems to be a pretty common trend, and you don't want to lose half of their players from one position unit. But it does feel like every single time there is something negative that happens here, something way more positive happens right away. And that's been the story of this South Carolina offseason 1 month in since the season ended a month ago. When we come back, we'll talk more about the addition by retention and the addition by subtraction that South Carolina has. Before we do, Let's talk about Rugiet. And I am fired up for this one, guys. Rugiet Ready. You guys have heard me talk about him before, and you are definitely about to hear me talk about it again, and I can't wait. So here's the deal. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugiet Ready is designed to help take back control. Rugiet Ready is a next generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in one mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. You connect with a board certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch to Rugiet. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com, locked on college, or sorry, Rugiet.com/locked on college. That is RUGIET.com/locked on college to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready, feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Locked on Gamecocks will continue right after this. Okay, let's dive back into this. And I want to be clear again. This is not like a point the blame or point the finger and be like, well, this kid sucks. I'm glad he's gone. Like, it is not anything about that. I think that in this day and age of football, there's a weird little dance you kind of have to do, which is and figuring out, hey, I hate this guy's gone, but I'm not going to sit here and lament on how upset I am about it or like how big of a deal it would have made an impact, and even unless it's a big deal, because there's so many moving parts to the college football world now that like there's not really a reason to. Hair looks fantastic today, guys. There's not really a reason to spend an overwhelming amount of time or an overzealous amount of time in talking about a player that's leaving if they're not coming back. I again wish him the best. Hope he does great. I don't think he was a piece that was going to help this team win football games next year, and that's where it kind of ends for me. So going back into why I think this is still, I look at the portal class in general, and I think the addition by subtraction thing. You've lost 12 players now. Okay, if you want to dive into the numbers of who is where and where people rank, there's not a single player that you have lost that has done more for themselves in terms of making them a 3-star that turned into a 4-star that you're leaving or anything like that. Now, there's players that I wish would have stayed. Like there's definitely players I wish would have stayed. One of those is Michael Smith, the very first one that entered the portal. Another one, obviously, Casey Henry. I wish we kept him. Brian Rowe Jr. is the biggest one, in my opinion, that is lost because I think he is the chance to be really special. And then there's a few others. Well, like Tree leaving it's not the end of the world, and I wish Jerron Willis would have stayed as well. But like outside of that, it's hard for me to really be like, oh man, cannot believe we lost all those players. Now, what you have been able to do is figure out how to retain some key pieces, and I don't think I'm being what's the best way to put it? I don't think I'm overreacting when I say that keeping Matthew Fuller is a pretty big deal. It's like it's at least at the very least it's a very underrated and overlooked thing that needs to be like should be given more credit, if that makes sense. Like we have really gone out of our way, me especially, to talk about. Hold on here. How big of a deal it was to keep Sellers, Harbor, Stewart, not necessarily in that order, but in general. But to get Matthew Fuller back, a running back that like, I don't think he was going to go somewhere else and all of a sudden become some star. But you look at what you currently have on this roster, and Fuller is your youngest back. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he'll be going to his 4th year. He would have been able to go make some money for himself somewhere, I'm sure. And also probably a place that would guarantee him a little bit more playing time than he was currently getting. And I look at what he is as a player, and I wasn't somebody that was like super, what's the best way to put it? Like I wasn't somebody that was ever super high on like him being like the guy. I thought Rasul Faison would be a really, really good addition to this team. But you saw what Fuller did against LSU with that 70-yard touchdown run. And one of the most criminal acts of the entire year was watching then offensive coordinator Mike Shula come in and say, all right, well, you're done for the first half. Didn't get another carry for the first half. I do think he's been mismanaged at this place. I also think he is maybe with what you currently have, Jordan Howell, Isaiah Augustave, Matthew Fuller. I think out of the three, he might be the most talented back you have. There's a case to be made for Augustave. There's really a case to be made for all three. But I think that Fuller, especially staying, it does a couple of things for you. And it does something that I kind of opined about the other day in terms of the offensive line, which was losing another offensive lineman, a good offensive lineman, makes you then have to commit to like, oh man, here's my allocation of money, right? Like, here's my allocation of money. This is how much I'm going to spend. It's all right here in this bag. I don't know why I'm holding it like this, but it's all right here, okay? I want to go get offensive linemen. I want to go get some running backs. I would like to go get a tight end maybe. I definitely need to get some defensive linemen. I would love to go get an edge rusher. Probably need a couple of defensive backs, and then we can kind of go from there. But losing all these offensive linemen, and then like you kind of have to cut into your budget and say, man, we really got to go get another guy because you're going to, at the very least, need bodies. That was the thing that sucks so bad about this year's offensive line was they played horribly for the most part, but they also were injured. It's like, just give me one of them. Be injured or be bad. Please don't be both. And they were somehow both. Matthew Fuller staying means that you don't really have to go into the portal and invest a ton of money at a position that you really didn't want to. They're still going to have to go get a running back. They might have to go get two. But you look at what they have coming back. Faison is obviously gone. And then you talk about just from like what he was able to do, Matt Fuller was able to do this year. He only played 102 total snaps, only had 72 carries. That was third on the team, right? That was third. It was ahead of Attaway. It was behind Faison, and it was behind Sellers, obviously. But not a tremendous year, averaged 3.6 yards per attempt. He's still, when you look at Howell averaged 5.7. I think you can start to at least formulate a system of, hey, how can we utilize all three of these guys' talents without having to go do, and this is not a shot at Rasul Faison. It's just being objective. He didn't hit. He didn't hit. He wasn't a guy that came in and was like, boom. I thought he was going to go for 1,100 yards. Didn't realize how bad the offensive line was going to be. But I also thought we were going to have more of a commitment to the run game where he was going to be the guy. And I definitely did not think that at the end of the year, looking back at it, he was only going to be on the field for 138 snaps and get less than 100 carries. I mean, Faison averaged 4.9 yards a carry and had 469 yards on just 96 attempts. You look at what else you have coming back. Like the kid from Colorado, Augustave, only had played in 3 games, only had 2 rushes for 1 yard. I do think there's some talent there. He's a former 4-star recruit out of high school. Howell is a guy that had only 15 attempts. It's crazy how little he played, man. And 85 yards. So this is your most tenured back that's coming back. And I also, like I said, I think it might be your most talented. There's reason to believe that's the case, considering how much he played. Now, the numbers don't do it justice, but at the very least, what it does is say, "Oh man, you just saved me $100,000." Like realistically speaking, probably just saved this program $100,000 to $200,000. And I don't know what the market is for current running backs. I know there's a kid from North Texas who's about to go to Texas because they lost all 4 of their backs, and he's going to get paid. I know that you've got a couple of guys from Texas that are leaving that South Carolina could be in the mix for, but are probably going to demand a pretty big payday, and also are coming in from a situation where like you're going to have to go spend something to get them. The current market for running backs, it was not something that was going to break the bank a year ago. But talking to Shannon Terry and some of the stuff that he has said too from On3, one of the things that he mentioned the other day was, hey, this market, like for quarterbacks especially and for elite players, and I don't know if they would be considered elite, but I do know they're former 5-stars, so they're going to be pushing that kind of talent thing to get a bigger payday, and I'm sure that'll tack on some money to whatever their paycheck will be. But you're talking about last year, the quarterbacks in that class, and even some of the offensive linemen were demanding up to 1 to 1.5 million. That's for offensive linemen. The quarterbacks were getting around 3. Some were rumored around 4. The kid from Duke got 2 years for 8. This year, they're expecting all the top quarterbacks to be between 3 to 5 million. And why that's important is that's not saying they're all going to get 5, but it is saying a lot of them are going to get 3. And that is a massive increase from last year. And I would expect something of the same for running backs. So if you're South Carolina and you're looking at how much money you have in this pot, it all can't go to a running back. It also all can't go to a position unit that you don't even know where is that even rank in terms of importance? So what Matthew Fuller has done by staying is save you a lot of money that you can now go back into the portal and get from positions of needs that are higher position of need and also probably more cost effective than in your whatever your budget is. All right. When we come back, we have one last segment. I want to talk about Torrian Gray and give this man his flowers and also talk about just how big of a deal it was for Jeremiah Donati and Shane Beamer to do once again keep him in the fold and keep another huge key piece in the fold. Before we do, I want to give a shout out to our friends at FanDuel. It was a crazy weekend in bowl games, also in the NFL. And I tell you what, guys, with FanDuel, Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the action with the NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Now, I tell you what, guys, I don't watch a ton of NBA until it becomes playoff time, but this will make me start. I'll tell you that. Get in on the app. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. You have boosts, you have bonuses, and more than anything, you have some surprises. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. It adds a little bit of extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So, before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. When we come back, we will close out today's episode with probably something we should have talked about at the start of the show, but here we are. Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right. Torrian Gray. And I tell you what we're going to do, honestly. We're going to do a special side episode of this because it really needs to be talked about. And I saw somebody dig into this the other day, and I don't have it off the top of my head. I'll make sure I go back so I can credit the right people that brought it up because that's what we should do. But somebody brought this up, and it was a really, really good point, and it kind of had the light bulb on. I thought keeping Torrian Gray was a really big deal in general. Outside of Lucas and outside of Clayton White, that's Sterling Lucas Sterling, law firm. That joke's probably not landing anymore, right? Probably time to move on from it. Either way, that'll be my New Year's resolution, is to try and stop making bad jokes. And if any of you in the comments make a comment about me always making bad jokes, I'm going to be very upset. So don't do it. Anyway, keeping Torrian Gray, I think Gray is probably the third most important staff member and assistant coach. I love Sean Elliott. You guys know that. I think he's so valuable in so many ways. I love Mike Fury. I think he's been great. But Torrian Gray, just the track record, what he's going to do from a recruiting standpoint, also, and just the dependability is probably the best way to phrase it. The dependability of having him on your staff and seeing what he's been able to do, it's just so big and it's just so impressive. And so keeping him, I think the way it was phrased was, if this is a guy you would have hired, it would have been positioned as, that's a big hire, man. That's a big time hire. Like, he's not up there with the names of, like, I'm trying to think of a great defensive coordinator you would want to hire right now. Blake Baker, Kane Womack, Schumann from Georgia. It's not like that. But what it is one of the best up and coming coaches and the guy who's been one of the best position unit coaches, coaching so many different things under his umbrella of anyone, not just in the conference, but in the country. So I think that we have talked about all these like big names, and it's a great. I think two things happened today from a retention standpoint that aren't going to get enough love that absolutely should. And so, like I said, tomorrow we'll open the show and do a sideshow specifically about Torrian Gray. But the thing about getting him back is Virginia Tech with James Franklin was going to pay him a decent amount of money. That is one of the first phone calls they made was to Torrian Gray. That's where he played. And you got to think like in this day and age of football too, one of the weird, unique, cool things I'm starting to see from a coaching standpoint is you're seeing guys like Brent Key, and these are head coaches, but Brent Key, Jeff Brom, Kenny Dillingham, these are all guys that are coaching at their alma mater. There's something to be said for that because it's like that's a place you love. And for most of those guys, it's all before the portal. So it's like you did spend 3, 4, 5 years there and loved, like the whole blood, sweat, and tears thing of for that university. Keeping him at Columbia, South Carolina, and not going home under a James Franklin staff and under a place that, let's be very honest, like pretty good recruiting bed there. Probably going to play in a conference that is not probably. You're definitely going to play in a conference that's much easier. And maybe that's the next step you take into going to become a defensive coordinator, or I'm sorry, not a defensive coordinator, a head coach, or whatever the next step on the ladder is. He could have been a defensive coordinator at the Power 4 level, but decided to stay here to coach this position unit and become the co-defensive coordinator. That's a tremendous job. And again, without trying to be too hokey or like sunshine pumping or whatever, it's also like something really to be said for the culture that's in place in Columbia, South Carolina, that I think we give a lot of credit to Shane Beamer, but it's also because of guys like Torrian Gray who have invested themselves so much into the program that it's created the culture that they want to be a part of because they have a part in it. And that I think is like really, really impressive and a really huge, huge deal for this team. That is all for today's episode. I appreciate you guys so much. We only got a couple more days in the year. We'll have several more shows before the new year starts, though. And as always, guys, until next time, go Cox.